Send it to
I'll close my eyes.
All right. Well, thank you all. So I have been asked by Ashvin and Raghu to come and talk about impromptu speaking. But in order to do that, I want to cover some of the premises that we bring to presentations to begin with. Now, I realize for many of you, you have familiarity with this. So this isn't meant to be the comprehensive guide to everything you wish you ever knew, but it is meant to actually give you an idea of the foundation of what we bring to impromptu speaking. So when we speak, we have two primary sources of information. One is our personal experience and reference material, which is things we read, our interests, our career, our family, our books, magazines, our education, and all that time we spend looking on the internet. So when we're on there, going into things, we're reading, we're learning, and we're absorbing. So right here is we are creating our reference library, a reference library that we'll use for speeches, but a reference library that we'll use for table topics as well. One thing that's a good practice, especially as starting or even advanced Toastmasters, is to just write ideas down, not full form speech ideas, just ideas. You know, I'd like to learn how to talk about this. I was talking with Ashvin while all of you were in the breakout rooms, found out he's a commercial pilot. You know, he could write down, I want to talk about being a commercial pilot. I want to talk about how I got my pilot's license. I want to talk about how I was interested in flying, different things like that, or different trips I said, or when he was sharing how he smuggled things across the border. No, he didn't say that. But he could bring those things down as potential ideas for speeches and just write that down. So think of what you are interested in life. Think of where you work in life, and think of how you can bring some of those things together into topics that interest you to share with people. That practice alone will expand your ability to do impromptu speaking. Now, you also have to narrow your focus when you think in terms of your audience. Who is your audience? How many people are going to be where you speak? If it's your club, if it's something other than your club, what's their age range? Because obviously, if we're talking from 20 to 60, that's a wide breadth of generations. And it's also a wide breadth of experience and knowledge base. And then, are you familiar with the subject that you're asked to speak about? So I always put that in the context. Recently, for instance, the District 101 Program Quality Director asked me if I would like to give a workshop on X and a workshop on Y. And I shared that I do a lot of Y in my speaking, but I don't feel that I'm qualified to share that as a level of expertise with everybody. Somebody who's more structured in Y maybe could do it better, because I could certainly give my experience, but that's an experience of opinion, not an experience of authority. So that comes down to how familiar you are with the subject. Will your audience have similar education, interests, backgrounds, and experiences that you're speaking to? So when you're speaking to a Toastmaster group, like Susan did last week, and she spoke about evaluation, many of the people in the room had some familiarity with Toastmasters evaluation, but there were some that didn't. So you have to realize that you're covering a spectrum every time we speak, even in a table topic, that goes from those with a knowledge base, those without a knowledge base. And when we're coming to a club such as this, that has a wide, broad spectrum of people, we have to recognize that just because we use a term that may be as familiar within some communities, it may not be familiar within other communities. So when we narrow our focus, we take a look at, is there a theme? Now, many meetings have themes. For instance, when you're looking at do the icebreaker, you already have an automatic theme. Your icebreaker theme, of course, is you. Any aspect of you. What you like, what you don't like, what you eat, what you don't eat, where you were educated, where you were trained, where you live, where you grew up, what you do now. It's about you. That's the theme. It gives you a theme. It's all about you. It's the one time in your life that you can be narcissistic and appreciated for it. So let yourself go with it. That's the theme. But when are you scheduled to speak? For instance, you had your breakout room sessions right now and you're scheduled to speak, you receive feedback. What happens after your speech? In this case, you got stuck with me. But it's the same thing that you want to know. In a traditional Toastmasters meeting, you're going to have table topics and then move on to the evaluations of the speakers. So table topics is structured within your agenda, and because you're provided an agenda, you know when it's going to happen. Because you're provided a speech, you know when it's going to happen in your agenda. But when we talk outside of Toastmasters, those are things we want to look at. When are you scheduled to speak and what happens after you speak? And then as we continue to narrow, what do you bring to every topic that nobody else has? You bring your own enthusiasm and your own interest. If it's something you just did as a research assignment to find out more about, you're bringing your enthusiasm and interest as to why you did that to the topic. It's the same thing in table topics. Every time we're asked a question, we're bringing ourselves to our answer. And we have to remember that. What's your knowledge base? Are you an authority? One time, as some of you may know, I spent 21 years in the Marine Corps. And one time, in one place when I was stationed in Manchester, New Hampshire, I never forgot this one gunnery sergeant asked this master sergeant, offhand, said, do you know anything about coins? Well, that master sergeant launched into coins for 30 minutes. Now, you don't have that much time in table topics, but obviously he considered himself an authority on coins. And he went on and on and on. I will have to admit, it was mostly boring. But that being said, is this a topic you know something about? So if someone asks you a question that you know something about, how can you coherently, cogently, and effectively respond to that question? So if you're an authority, share it, but don't be as boring as that guy. Be specific. Is the topic specific enough for the time allowed? Now, when you're doing a longer presentation, for instance, Susan gave us a 20-minute presentation last week. Is the topic specific enough for the time allowed? If you're doing a 4 to 6 minute icebreaker or a 5 to 7 minute traditional speech, you want to make sure that the information you're giving covers that time, but is not so dense that we don't get enough time to digest what you're serving us in that presentation. And in a table topics response, as you know, we have 1 to 2 minutes. We don't have a lot of time to develop the full expression of the topic based on what we know or what we think we know. And if you have subpoints, do they support the topic or they just added points to stretch it out? Want to avoid that. When you're doing a table topics, it's nice to keep that in mind because when you're asked a question, you suddenly start churning as to what you're going to think of. And these things may all come up. Well, you don't really have time for 2 points most often. You might only have time for 1, but can you get 1 effective point out in response to that question? What does that do? That helps build the skill for us in determining the effective subpoints we bring into our regular speeches. Table topics is our automatic preparation for longer speeches. And that'll teach you what can you cut from the body of the speech. Most speeches suffer from too much or imbalanced information from them. That's the only thing wrong with them. Most speeches gain from you presenting something of interest to you. So let's get to the 5-step formula for answering table topics. There will be a 30-page test after this presentation. You'll turn it in and only those who pass will get credit for the course. So none of that, of course, being true. Well, what is the 5-step formula? It's really simple. First thing you want to do is listen. It's the greatest skill we gain in Toastmasters, listening to what's being asked. You have to listen to what's being asked to develop an appropriate response. As most of you may be, I'm in meetings all day at work. All of them are remote. Everybody is remote. Nobody's in the office where I am. None of the people on the team. And I can't tell you how many times people are asked a question and they say, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Because they're not paying attention. They're multitasking and doing something else, so they're not listening. Well, in table topics, we're trying to teach ourselves as Toastmasters to be effective listeners. We need to not only be effective for table topics, but we can't be effective evaluators if we don't listen. So listening is one of the skills we're constantly developing. There used to be a motto in Toastmasters, which they changed to where leaders are made. It used to be better listening, better thinking, better speaking. The real point of that motto was that if we listen, we take in new information. New information gets added to other information we already have inside of ourselves. And now it gives us a broader and more open way to speak effectively about a topic or subject. So listening is critical to table topics. Now, when called upon, you can request the person who asked you to repeat the question. Usually the topics master, sometimes the Toastmaster, or might be in some other fashion. But you can ask them to repeat the question to make sure you have a clear understanding of it. And when you ask them to repeat the question, it doesn't count against your time. Or as part of your answer, which we'll touch on a little further, you can repeat the question back to them, which does count toward your time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, as I'll share in a little bit. So listen when the question is being asked. In effective table topics, of course, the question is asked before someone is called. So you don't know if that question's coming to you, but it means it's time to pay attention and listen. One of the first things you can also do before you speak is breathe. Take a breath. One of the things that happens when we're called upon is we tighten up. And now all of a sudden, we're not getting the air that we need to effectively speak. And that tightening up creates more tension in our body. So what can we do? Just breathe. Now, all you can do is breathe in through the nose, out through your mouth. I always recommend 3 breaths, but some people are not able to do that. Take those breaths, though. Why don't you try it now? Taking a breath just through your nose, out through your mouth. Did you feel an automatic relaxing happening to your body? Did you feel that? When you do that, your body relaxes and the stress goes away. The next thing you can do that's not said in here is smile. Smile at the people looking at you, because you know what? Someone's going to smile back. When someone smiles back, you feel like you have an automatic ally in the room, even on Zoom. And then the first thing you can say is, thank you, Mr. or Madam Table Topics Master or Topics Master. And then that's the courtesy response. That lets the timer know, that lets everyone know you're ready to proceed with your answer. Now, if you're going to ask them to repeat the question first, I would say, don't say that. You could say, Mr. Topics Master, could you please repeat the question? That doesn't count on you. But once I start into thank you, Mr. and Madam Table Topics Master, I'm now starting my time to repeat the question. But that also provides me time to think. It gives me that moment because that's my standard response. I know I'm going to say it. Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. My mind is now thinking while I'm saying that. The next thing you want to do is confirm. That's where we talked about already. We want to confirm the question by repeating it back. How did I learn to ride a bike? Now, while I'm saying that back to the Table Topics Master, I'm thinking. I'm actually thinking of how did I learn to reply. Now, this does count toward your time. So thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. How did I learn to ride a bike? I'm getting time to think. Now, where this works to our advantage is by acknowledging and confirming the question, I'm getting closer to that 1 minute qualifying time. I haven't actually answered anything, but I've used up some of that 1 minute to get to my green light, which is actually a good thing because we're trying to learn to say something coherent. For instance, how did I learn to ride a bike? Well, I had a 2-wheel Schwinn and my father put me on it and he took me to the parking lot of Amerenik High School where I grew up. And in the parking lot, he pushed me forward and told me to pedal. And so I pedaled. And I pedaled right directly into the pothole that was ahead of me. Now, he didn't tell me how to steer, and he didn't tell me how to brake, but he did tell me how to pedal. And I did exactly what I was told. I couldn't even turn, but that's how I learned to ride a bike. Now, that is how I start to respond to the question of how did you learn to ride a bike? And by the time I tell that little bit, along with thank you, Mr. and Madam Table Topics Master, and repeating the question back to him, I've reached my 1 minute. So my nervousness of being able to answer the question is now completed because I've answered the question within the allotted time and I made it. I get better as time goes on, but that's an initial starting point. The other thing is there are several ways to answer. One is answer the question asked. I just answered, how did I learn to ride a bike? That was it. Years later, that's all I did was ride the bike up and down the East Coast, but that was many years ago and many pedals away. So you answer the question asked. But the next thing is there's another technique. And some Toastmasters don't agree with this, but I'll tell you why I agree with it and disagree with the Toastmasters who don't. The other way to answer the question is to change the question. For instance, how did you learn to ride a bike? Well, I never did learn how to ride a bike, but let me tell you how I learned to ride a skateboard. Now, some Toastmasters feel you must answer that question. I don't. In a lot of my meetings at work, somebody will ask a question or ask me a question, and I won't answer that question. I'll say, wait, before we go there, I'd like to know the answer to this, because I feel that this other question is foundational to get to their question. So what we're learning in Table Topics is not just how to answer the question asked, but how do we respond in an unknown, impromptu situation when we're asked a question? How do we respond coherently, cogently, and effectively? What that all means is, can I give a valid response? That means sometimes the question asked is not the real question. The question asked can be changed to another question. I never did learn how to ride a bike, but let me tell you how I learned to ride a skateboard. Very simple, very easy, and I believe that's effective. You took the question, you turned it into a different question that you can answer. And what have you done? You've responded to an impromptu question effectively in that situation. So the 5-step formula for answering table topics is fairly simple. 1, you're always expected to answer. What's the worst thing you can do in table topics? Not answer at all, not have any answer. So you have 2 ways to answer the question. One is, I ask you a question you absolutely cannot answer, and you're completely thrown by it. Then change the question to a question you can answer so that you can accomplish what we're trying to do in table topics. To me, table topics is not the answer you're answering the question given. It's the ability to respond to an impromptu question and provide an effective response. Not necessarily the answer. Nobody talks about the answer, the response. So we have 2 approaches that make it possible to always have an answer to table topics. So when you say, I don't have an answer, that's when you know you didn't provide an effective response. You only have 1 to 2 minutes for your answer. 1 minute is the minimum. And I said, we kind of get to the minimum by playing a little bit of a game till we become more effective at it. Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. How did I learn to ride a bike? I've now just eaten up some seconds that gets me closer to my 1 minute. 2 minutes plus 30 extra seconds is the maximum time to qualify for a valid table topics answer. So the other part to keep in mind, it's not a soliloquy. It's not a speech to elect you as President of the United States. It's a 1 to 2 minute answer, maybe 1 point, and provide as much effectiveness as you can in your response to the question, because that's the skill you're building. Say what you want as simply and directly as possible. And remember, the end is always near. Bring your comments to a close. Remember to say, in conclusion, in table topics. You know why? Lets us know you're ending. You don't have to do that with speeches. It's very passé. And I'm not saying table topics, you have to do this. But when you're looking to build your skill set for table topics, if you're uncomfortable with it, you've got an opening, which we gave you. You say the question, and you've got a closing. Mr. or Madam Table Topics. And notice it says, in conclusion, that is how I learned to ride a bike. You have now bookended your table topics presentation, just as we encourage you to do with speeches. Mr. Table Topics Master, how did I learn to ride a bike? Tell your story. In conclusion, that is how I learned to ride the bike, Mr. Table Topics Master. I've now created an opening and closing format structure that makes it easy for you to put your meat in your sandwich in between. Just as last week, Susan talked about the sandwich method of evaluation, look at your table topics the same way. The bread is your opening to the table topics master and repeating the question. The closing is in conclusion, repeating the question, Mr. Table Topics Master. You've now put your meat in between. Whoop, I went backwards. I've been known to go backwards in my life. So now, remember, every presentation we give has an introduction. It has a transition from the introduction into what we're leading to in the topic and our main body. We did this by Mr. Table Topics Master. How did I learn to ride a bike? Well, let me tell you how I learned to ride a bike. There's my transition. I'm now getting into my main body. I had a two-wheel Schwinn. My father took me to the parking lot of Mamaroneck High School where I grew up. He put me on the bike and he told me to pedal and pushed me forward. And that's exactly what I did. I went forward into the pothole in the parking lot. He didn't teach me how to turn. He didn't teach me how to brake. He didn't teach me how to steer. But he did teach me to pedal and go forward. That is how I learned to ride a bike. Transition out. I could have said in conclusion, that's how I learned to ride a bike. Mr. Table Topics Master. Boom. That is it. The same structure we use for a speech. So think of your table topics in the same way. And now, remember that today's success is the result of good judgment. Good judgment is the result of experience, and experience is the result of bad judgment. We need to make those mistakes so we can learn how to do them well, so we can do them properly going forward. When you answer a table topics question, you're going to answer it again and again and again in your head, or maybe even out loud after the meeting. You're going to think of, why didn't I say this? Why couldn't I have said that? Why didn't I do that? You know what's happening? You're learning. You're learning, you're developing, you're going forward and evolving. So now you're putting more information into that library upstairs that you'll draw from the next time you're asked a table topics question. May not be the same one, but you're now putting more information to the forefront to draw from. Your library gets expanded. That all comes from answering that one table topics question. I can think of answers that I'd rather have given to questions even now from years ago. I really wish I'd said that. You know, it's like they talk about when you go to the party and you think of the greatest quip the next day when you wake up. Why didn't I say that? We all go through that. That's part of our learning process. In adults, our learning process occurs within from our experience. We learn to do by doing. And now, before I answer your questions, I have some questions for you. So I'm going to stop this share, and I'm now going to do something a little bit different. We're going to actually do some table topics. Da, 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 da. So let's see. So I'm going to ask right now, Raghu or Ashvin, if you could take me off Spotlight so that I can see the field ahead of me. And I am going to share a little audio here. Now, in 1969, the group Sager and Evans released this song. So what will they find in the year 2525? Amanda.
Sorry, I don't know. Sorry.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
You want to pass it to somebody else?
I will. Let me pass it to Mohan. Mohan, what will they find in the year 2525?
Sorry, I did not listen it thoroughly.
Well, let's go to Josepha Kingsley Williams.
What will they find in the year 2025? I have absolutely no idea, but I'm sure it's going to be something quite interesting and fascinating, and I'd love to find out what that is.
Oh, come on, Josepha, you could have done better than that. I'm going to actually pass the same question to Rishikesh. Rishikesh, give me what they're going to find in 2525. Remember, we went over the techniques. Use the two techniques.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Mr. Table Topic Master. I am little bit skeptical about the future. My motto of life is to live in the present. Don't worry about the future. Future is uncertain. Focus on your present. Take care of your current time. If you do good in your current time, your future will take care of itself. So right now, I am not focusing about 2025. I am focusing only on 2023. If my 2023 is good enough, definitely my 2025 is going to be a best enough. That's my take on on this topic. Back to you.
Excellent. Let's give him a big round of applause. That was excellent. That's exactly the point. Get yourself to 1 minute when I ask this question. Remember, you don't have to be literal. You can do exactly what he did and turned it into the question he wanted to answer. He took the question and said what he wanted to do with it. That's excellent. Thank you so much for doing that. Wonderful example of that. So the next question is a little bit different. Let me change. I'm going to change my background to this. My next question is, on February 11th, 1990, after 27 years in prison for his opposition to apartheid, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. What do you know about apartheid, and why was Nelson Mandela opposed to it? Maya. And remember the two techniques. That's what we're practicing.
It's muted.
You're still muted, Maya. Excellent.
Thank you, Table Topic Master. I'm not aware what Nelson Mandela was speaking about because I've not read about it. And most importantly, I'm not interested in the politics. That's the reason I'm not aware of it. But I think I should have a little idea about it. So if the time permits, I will go read about these great leaders. Thank you.
Oh, come on, make it longer. All right, if you can't, that's okay. It's okay if you can't. Well, just to let you know, apartheid was in South Africa, and you didn't actually have to know what it was. This was a good one to turn into a question you did want to answer. I don't know about apartheid or Nelson Mandela, but what I do know about is what they're doing in my local town, or what I do know about is what the school is doing, or what I do know about. You see, you want to try to practice those techniques. Don't get stuck in the question. Try to practice the techniques, get to your 1 minute. Okay, the next one in the US on February 2nd, thank you very much, Maya. We hold the ceremony of releasing Punxsutawney Phil, a groundhog. If he sees his shadow, we got a little more to go. If he sees his shadow and goes back inside, we have 6 more weeks of winter. Do you have any ceremony or ritual that you like to do, even if you aren't sure it really provides real results? What is it, and why do you do it? Mary Thomas.
Thank you, Table Topic Master. There are many rituals, not only in my country, not only in my culture, that say that results can be achieved. I have tried quite a few, and I'm actually looking forward to shamanic rituals. I have tried quite a few. For example, I have tried inner healing work. I have tried card readings. I have tried, they're not really rituals, but they go into another aspect of healing. When we talk about rituals, it's always about something that's going to come back to me. It's going to be something that is going to make me a better person, or something that can heal my trauma, my childhood trauma, for example. I look at it that way. Therefore, I would still go back to wanting to see a shaman for it. And at the same time, I would say that I did well with inner healing, with mirror exercises that has been propagated by Louise Hay. I have done psychological healing. I have done spiritual healing in the form of prayer, vows. Vows are a big rituals over in my side of the world. And that would be what I would say. Back to you, Table Topic Master.
Thank you so much, Mary. What a wonderful job and a way to take that question. Raghu, I'm going to ask one more, and then in the interest of time, I'm going to move along, but I've got one more to ask. So thank you, Mary. Once again, see how she bracketed that. That's what we want to do. That's what the exercise is about. So let's have one more very interesting little thing. You know, this is from 1959, actually. Let's take a look and see. Hopefully this will come through. Now, in 1959, Lonnie Donegan released this song with a question. Whoops. So my question is, does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? If not, why not? If so, why? How about Amanda? trying to unmute. Okay, Amanda, while you're trying to do that, we're going to move on because in the interest of time, how about Vamsi? Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight?
She was able
If
to.
not,
Amanda was
what's
able
that?
to unmute. Amanda, do you want to try?
Next time. Thank you. Next time.
Yeah. So let's go back to, where were you, Ramsey? Or did you disappear just to get out? Oh, there you are, Vamsi. Yeah, does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? If not, why not? If so, why?
Okay, and thank you for the wonderful topic, table topics master. I never thought of chewing gum coming into my life in the table topics segment. So that is something fascinating, and it's been so many years. I chewed one, and actually I couldn't even recollect what to say at this point of time. You know, it's given me so many remnants of my childhood playing with the chewing gums, and that too, in the morning. You know, it is quite early for me also here. And morning, you gave me a morning topic of what these chewing gums, and well, let me put it this way. Keeping the topic aside, I really am fascinating to try new sort of chewing gums that are available in the market as of now. And I think there are so many people in this meeting who are fascinated, looking at me. You know, why Vamsi, only you should try. Let us give us also a chance. Maybe we can go out and try new fascinating things. Not only chewing gums, but also maybe let's go for a trekking. Why not? What do you say, Hrishikesh? He's quite enthusiastically waiting for me and checking what Vamsi would say today. It's completely out of the situation for me to taking up the topic. But thanks for the opportunity. Over to you, David Topics Master.
Okay, thank you very much, Vamsi. Thank you for taking that and taking it away. And notice what he did. He also put it into a little bit of a different direction of where he wanted to go with it, which is an excellent thing to do. Well, that's pretty much it for my time. I did put a handout in the chat room that talks about everything and gives you the notes of what we talked about. And it also gives you ideas for opening and closing. And I think I screen accidentally, but I'm trying to stop the share. So I've lost my screen altogether at this moment in time. So I return it back to you.
Yeah. Can we open for questions if somebody has any questions for you?
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. So how I worked on my table topic when I first joined Toastmaster was that while going to office, I have like 10 minutes of walk. So I'll take a list of topics and practice while I'm walking to train my muscles. And one question I have in mind is it okay to take a pause for 5 seconds or 10 seconds to think through what I'm going to talk about? Or do I have to immediately start going through like one of your frameworks, like with the thank you and while saying thank you, table topic master?
I believe we lost Solarzar. We'll wait for a couple of seconds. Do you have his number, Ashwin? Do you want to call and check?
Yeah, let me give him a call.
May I answer that question?
Sure.
It is appropriate to take time. They don't start your clock timing until you actually start to speak. So as Solarzar said, take that breath. He said even 3, and that is perfectly acceptable while you gather your thoughts. However, one caveat, if you're in a contest, especially at the higher levels, I was in a district level table topics contest, and I hesitated for a few seconds while I gathered my thoughts, and they said I had the doe in the headlights look. So because I did not respond immediately, it did count against me in a judging situation. But in the club setting, perfectly acceptable.
Susan, yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm for table topic contests. What about our non-verbal communication? Is that also counted? For example, there could be a question that entails.
Yep. The timing rule says that it starts with non-verbal or verbal communication. You move your hand and it starts.
Okay. Right.
So Susan, today I attended a contest. It was an area contest. It was not a high-level contest. And the gentleman who won it, he just stood there, gave a smile, didn't move any part of his body. He just stood there, smiling, took a deep breath, and then he went on. It was about curiosity. He went on to a story about his 2 cats and their curiosity, and how the curiosity killed the cat. He won the contest. It was a beautiful way.
Sarika, that's fine. It just has to do with the judgings. If it looks like you're terrified and just not responding, but if it fit the speech to get the interest in, then the judges wouldn't do it. And it's all subjective, how long you wait and how you are. Each judge might feel differently about it. So that was the only caveat that I thought I might answer, having had that experience. Thank you.
That's true. It's very subjective.
Yeah, Solarzar, he's here. Anybody has any questions for his presentation? Please ask him.
Sorry, I got kicked off. I apologize.
That's Raghu's fault. Just kidding.
Anybody, any question? Okay. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah. As a table topic master, can you suggest some ideas to come up with good topics as a table topic master?
Generally, the most ideal thing to do is, if your club meeting has a theme, to bring your table topics around that theme, but to also do something that's topical. You know, for instance, I specifically chose things that were a little different to try to get you to try the process of either answering or going to an alternative way to change the question. So as a table topics master, I would say, for instance, if you were watching something on TV this week, if you're reading a book that was of interest to you, if you saw a particular movie, you know, if there's something that culturally is taking over the consciousness, you know, if you're not into politics, but if you're politics, State of the Union or something like that, then use that as a theme. But make sure if your meeting has a theme that you're not running counter to it. One year I was a table topics master for a meeting that was, I was the Toastmaster for a meeting that was around the holiday time, around Christmas. And so I made the meeting around holidays, but my favorite holiday is Halloween. So I did it all on Halloween. Meantime, I hadn't communicated that to my table topics master, who did a wonderful Christmas themed table topics, but it was killed because I did all this Halloween stuff with bats and witches and everything else. So I would say coordinate with your Toastmaster, see if there's a theme or an idea, and use that as your theme basis going forward. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
By the way, I should point out that there's only 260 days left until Halloween. So if you need to do your preparations now, it's good.
Sure. Thank you very much, Solarzar. Ashwin, do you want to present the certificate?
Say that again. Oh, this display the certificate? Absolutely. And actually, I have a question for Solarzar too. I got something really good from the presentation too, is the part about talk about what you know, right? Not the subject at hand. And I think that's what we were trained of, just trying to think of something and we freeze. But if we could flip it and talk about something we could talk about, then we could just keep practicing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And actually, every one of the ones who did a more robust answer, I think the ones who didn't, I think froze on the question. The ones who did kind of took it in a direction that they could answer. And I think that that's an important illustration for all of us.
Okay.
But thank you, Ashwin, for sharing that. I put that in just for you because I love you so much.
Thank you. All right. Okay. We would like to give you something. It's not a new car. Unfortunately, we can't afford that because we're Toastmasters. But we do have something for you. It's a certificate that's not redeemable, but it's good. You could hang it on your wall if you want.
Yeah, a certificate of limited value, not redeemable, and you can't really do anything with
it. Is. Now, I am new at, doing this, but I will, here. How do you share? There you go. I know what to do. Okay, can you see it?
I can. That's really wonderful. Thank you. And in all
welcome,
seriousness, I appreciate
we
it.
will be sending it to you. So,
along with your home game, right?
Yes. And the quiz. Are we still doing the quiz, Solarzar?